On paper, Loop8, Summer of Gods from Marvelous and Seek Games should be incredible. It takes elements from my favourite RPGs such as turn-based combat, it tries to weave those into a really interesting story and uses what it calls an emotion-based system which punctuates its visual novel segments. All of these systems are tied together and affect the various endings and then sprinkle the whole lot with a good dose of Groundhog Day and well yeah, this should be perfect. Is Loop8 a divine masterpiece or a god-awful mess? Well, a thanks to the publisher for the review copy. Now, let's find out. Loop8 is set in a rural Japanese town in 1983. You play as the character Nini, who, believe it or not, comes from space. Yep, you heard me correctly. This planet is in a right sorry state, with much of humanity seeking refuge amongst the stars. Unfortunately, this hasn't worked out either, and you're sent to one of the last bastions of hope, the picturesque town of Ashihara Nakatsu, the only place that hasn't been destroyed by the Kagai. Who exactly are the Kagai, you ask? Well, that's a very good question. Let's just say they're an antagonistic presence from another dimension. But you have to admit, that's an interesting storyline, right? You'll begin the loop by meeting a cousin, and she'll guide you through the town, introducing you to certain people, and then the first real shock comes in the form of this loop mechanic. What exactly is it? Well, essentially, every time the world is destroyed, you'll restart the loop. Every character that you've met, every interaction that's taken place will return to square one, as if they'd never happened. Buckle up, because it's going to be a confusing journey as I explain to you exactly how this works. Now, Loop8 is all about relationships. This town is filled with various people and a handful of locations, and you'll begin each day by waking up in your house. You could head to the school and study, improving your character's statistics, seek out the various shrines for a blessing. These blessings affect any of the characters in the world, again improving their stats, or engage in many conversations using the relationship system. And here's where one of the wheels gets a little wobbly, although it doesn't quite come off. Relationships are split into essentially three categories. You've got your friends, you've got those that you're a little more affectionate about, those would be the relationships, as in dating, and then there are those who are antagonistic towards you or have hatred. This friendship, affection and hate system punctuates every aspect of the gameplay, as we'll see. Talking to people, you'll see not a percentage chance, but you'll have a on-screen written chance of how successful the actions will be. They might be things like flirting or just being kind, and once successful, the relationship will be boosted. On paper, that might sound quite boring, and in reality, it's really quite boring. You're either successful or you're not. They're either happy or sad. If you're right, then great, the relationship slightly improves, and if you're wrong, it drops a small amount, but it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. Their mood can be seen in the corner of the screen, and this will also affect the types of things you say and do. Once you've hit certain arbitrary, invisible relationship stages, the status will change, such as best friends, and this will unlock further options. You might invite someone out for dinner, or you might even push a little further and try and get a date. The reason this whole system is integral to the game, though, is because as you build up relationships and improve them, you can actually party up by inviting someone for a walk, and you'll need to do that when we get over to the combat sections of the game, but not every character can initially engage in combat. There are certain ones who, let's just say, are a little more godly, and they have the ability to come and fight with you right off the bat. All this social schmoozing takes an effect on your energy and stamina levels. You can restore this by eating, and each interaction will also cost you time and progress the day. Certain individuals are happier at different times of day, but I really feel like they could have done far more with this system, especially with how intrinsic it is to the game's design. It's not like these relationships can be left alone, as they play a direct part in the other half of the game. By its design, the world is on a constant one-way collision course with catastrophe. The number of days until the destruction of the world are shown at the bottom of the screen. Despite its repetition, I did actually enjoy gradually building up those friendships, and on certain days, some of those Kagai will begin to infect your world, and you may have the option of visiting what's known as Yamotsu Hirasaka. You're going to want to take someone with you, as I said, and hopefully you've got the relationships to convince them to come, as it's within that mirror world that combat is first introduced. Akin to a turn-based JRPG, the attacks that you have available allow you to use them with either friendship, affection, or hate. Hateful attacks on these smaller enemies can do more damage, but they can also have a negative effect. Attacks will also drop your stamina pool, so eating before you enter this mirror world is actually quite important. You'll find strange glowing portals, which can be unlocked once you've essentially got enough keys, but you can only gain these if your character has an undefined prerequisite, be it in charm or some other relationship, personality or physical aspect, which you'll hopefully have improved in the real world. But not knowing exactly what they are, it can feel a little confusing. While this mirror world directly reflects the real world, you don't have the same fast travel options, but you'll eventually reach a boss. These bosses are the same characters from that real world, and this is what I was talking about. If you've built up a good relationship with them, when you perform, let's say, a friendship attack, it will do far more damage. What's more tricky is making sure that your party members also have the right relationship. There are ways that you can influence this by basically saying good things about people, but it doesn't feel like an organic relationship system, especially when you're just saying the same nice things over and over again about certain people until that person gets sick of hearing your voice, gets angry, and then you have to just leave it for the day. Combat also only lets you control Nini. He can defend other people and heal himself, but you can't directly control the moves your companions do. This can add an element of RNG, as if they don't heal you up or improve your stamina at the right moment, then you're heading for another loop if you die. I have to say, personally, I was saving the game, and if I died, reloading, because the thought of completely restarting from scratch is just not very fun, especially as those relationship elements, they're not engaging enough the first time round. If you have to see the exact same dialogue 2, 3, 4, even more times, yeah, that's not going to work. Now, with that said, it's inevitable at some point, though, that you won't be able to beat a certain boss and that loop may restart. You might wonder what the point of that is. Well, your relationship status will improve much more quickly the second time around, but your personal patience, I'm not so sure. I know mine certainly didn't. Loop8 then ends up feeling a bit confused, as if it doesn't quite know what it wants to be and how to do it. There are fun aspects. I do quite like the boss fights, but when being developed, I don't think they thought enough about those loops, about what that actually feels like as a player. Groundhog Day as a 1 hour and 30-minute film was fun, but 29 hours into Loop 8, having seen those same elements so many times, and with so many that constantly pop up, like these blessings with this exact same dialogue, it just doesn't quite hit the mark for me. If you're a huge fan of visual novels, then there's a chance you'll like some of these aspects, but for most players, it's going to be a loop too far. I'd give the gameplay 10 out of 20 and the controls 14 out of 20. Visually, Loop 8 looks lovely. I really do like the light-hearted art style, the colors of the town, the way everything's painted, and they've gone for a very interesting animation style. The character animations, they might look laggy, they're not. They've actually animated them to replicate an anime. Sometimes this works brilliantly, and at others, unfortunately, it makes it look like the game's lagging, specifically in combat. This scene right here is locked out at 30 FPS, but to my eye, it makes it look very, very stuttery. It's a nice one to play in handheld, it suits that style, although it doesn't have touchscreen, which is a little disappointing, and the vocal work is reasonable across the board. It's a solid dynamic soundtrack, but it doesn't escape the repetition of the loop, with that musical loop restarting when you enter a specific area, and as the tens of hours build up, it goes from being enjoyable to a little irritating. Visuals and performance. The visuals and performance then, they score 16 out of 20. Sound and audio, they score 14 out of 20. Loop 8 is going to set you back £44.99 or your regional equivalent. And there is a physical that's already a little cheaper here in the UK, and the whole thing fits into 3.4 gigs. While there's a potential here for, well, hundreds of hours of play if you want to get all the different endings, for me in a game like this, the value's in the journey rather than that time. And in this one, I found myself asking, are we nearly there yet? I give value 12 out of 20. I was really looking forward to Loop 8 Summer of Gods, and I have to say, I'm quite disappointed. It's not a terrible game, but its systems don't gel well enough together, and a mechanic that could have been really interesting, that being the looping, you end up dreading it a little, and doing everything you can to avoid one more loop. Bear in mind it's going to take you 2 or 3, to at least see some of those endings. Yeah, it's a shame. Some aspects I enjoy, and there will certainly be an audience for this, but that won't be most players. It gets a SwitchUp score of 66%. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the video. Hopefully it wasn't too harsh. I think it's a very fair reflection of the game that I've been playing for the last 30 hours. Let me know down in the comments. And as always, a big thanks to all of you that enjoy it, yeah. And our Patreons and members. Remember, if you want to buy a physical copy, you can use PlayAsia. Use our code, which is down in the description, to save a bit of money.
And as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!